Today's events on Capitol Hill will go down in history, but it's not the first time, of course, the U.S. Senate has conducted an impeachment trial.
It happened twice before with Presidents Bill Clinton and Andrew Johnson. Now lawmakers are looking back at those cases ahead of President Trump's trial. Larry Sabato is the director of the University of Virginia Center for Politics, and he's joining us now from Charlottesville, Virginia, to give us some context on the president's impeachment trial. So thank you so much for joining us. I feel like when we first started to talk about impeachment, there was a lot of comparisons to Johnson's impeachment, maybe because of the personalities and how emotional people have been about the whole thing. But I guess they were emotional about Clinton. But increasingly, the comparisons are now with the Clinton format, if you will. So can you talk to us a little bit about just how this impeachment trial is going to unfold compared to how Bill Clinton's did?
Yes, you've asked the right question in the right context. I don't think there will be many non-historical references to the Andrew Johnson trial. I don't think there are a lot of precedents that will apply. But in the Clinton trial, absolutely. The format and the arrangements will, for the most part, be carried over into this trial. And I'll tell you what the biggest similarity is. The Clinton era and the Trump era were and are very polarized times. And that tells you automatically that the incumbent who's on trial has a very good chance to be, if not exonerated, then found not worthy to be thrown out of office. You can put it any way you want. Because the founders who wrote this, remember, at a non-party point in American history, we didn't have parties. We barely even had factions forming. We were just coming into our own as a country. And so the founders couldn't have imagined that people would be so divided by party that they wouldn't consider the facts. And so they put into the Constitution that two-thirds of the Senate, in this case, 67 of 100 senators, as with Clinton, would have to vote to convict. That's almost impossible to get.
But Larry, I know that you said there probably isn't a lot of commonality with President Johnson's impeachment, but the one thing that does seem to be common with Johnson, with Clinton, and now with President Trump is the politics surrounding this. In other words, when Andrew Johnson was impeached, Republicans were angry that he was returning some of those states' rights and removing some of the policies that they'd put in for Reconstruction. He legislated the black codes that basically preserved the slavery system in all but its name. And that seemed to be driven by politics, too, even though the procedures that they may have used back then are probably very different than the ones that we, as a country, used for President Clinton and now President Trump.
Yes, I agree with that argument. That's similar. And here's why. I hear people all day yesterday and even early this morning, they're just going to be jurors in a regular trial. No, these are life and death politicians. They live and die by politics. They cannot shed their politics. And they're going to be responsible for their vote, not just to history, but to their own electorates, at least for the ones who are not retiring. So, of course, it will be political. This is an ultimate political test for our Constitution and our system.
The Clinton trial, the Clinton impeachment changed a number of things, and even the way we sort of investigate things now, because we went from sort of special prosecutor, independent prosecutor. We changed the rules because of the way the impeachment unfolded with Bill Clinton. And a number of the lawmakers that are there today were there back then as well. What lessons do you think they learned from the process under Clinton that they may be bringing forward today?
That's a great question.
You mean the process of the trial or just the process of impeachment?
I'd say the process of impeachment, not just the process, but the fallout.
I think they learned that you cannot change the spots on a leopard. That is, as we were just saying, if you're a politician and you've been elected to high office, probably repeatedly, you're going to continue to act as a politician. So applying the usual rules of the jury system or a trial procedure is not going to work. And here's a good example. In the case of the Senate trial, while the Chief Justice may occasionally make a ruling, any senator can challenge the ruling and it goes to a vote of the full Senate with 51 votes being sufficient to overturn the Chief Justice's ruling. Do you have that in a regular trial? Does the jury get to overturn the presiding judge's decisions? Of course not.
Larry, as you know, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has repeatedly said that President Trump's impeachment will, quote, last forever. The president himself has long talked about the stigma of impeachment. Those close to him say he always referred to President Clinton as a president who'd been impeached.
Yeah.
What impact does impeachment have on the legacies of a president? There have only been two, but with Bill Clinton, it is still, is it an asterisk?
I go back and forth with that because I feel like, and I know many people have said this is sort of a stain on his legacy, but I look at Bill Clinton and he seems to have come out okay. I mean, he's sort of a statesman now, making lots of money, giving, at charity events and so on and so forth. So is it as bad as we're saying?
Well, Americans are forgiving people, and generally they love second acts, right? So that may be part of that.
Or with politicians, third, fourth, and fifth acts.
Right.
But yeah, look, will Trump be able to go on once he leaves office? Of course, and his base will never desert him. It doesn't matter what comes out. We all know that. So yeah, he can continue. But look, nobody would want the stain of impeachment on their record. Yes, Bill Clinton has gone on, but anytime there's an article done about Clinton, it almost always refers to the impeachment, and he's known as an impeached president. Now, President Nixon didn't get a formal impeachment and certainly wasn't ousted by the Senate, but everyone knows he would have been, and that's why he resigned. He knew what was coming. It would have been the end of his presidential pension and many of his perks. So he did the smart thing. He got out while the getting was relatively good. So I think it's going to hurt Trump's image, although nothing will change people's minds. People either love Trump or they hate Trump. I've never met anybody in between.
Yeah.
You either love him or you hate him. It's going to continue to be true no matter what the Senate trial results in.
Hey, Larry, you bring up Watergate and President Nixon, and as we talked about with Johnson and Clinton and now Trump, the politics surrounding that. The point that you made there about President Nixon saying, you know what, I don't want to deal with this. I'm going to get out while the getting is good.
Yeah.
So it does suggest to me that in that particular case, had the president been impeached, we might have seen those legislators rising above politics. In other words, both parties coming out and voting to remove this president who was extreme. People forget how popular Richard Nixon was. Maybe not at Trump levels, but he was an extremely popular president.
Yes, after all, he still holds the record for the highest popular vote percentage in his 1972 reelection. But of course, by the time he resigned, he was in the 20s. People had learned a lot about what he had done during the Watergate process. But, it was political, and yet back in that time, the Republican Party was a center-right party. The Democratic Party was a center-left party, with the exception of Southern Democrats who voted like Republicans. So you had the makings of a bipartisan coalition. And sure enough, who delivered the message to Richard Nixon in the Oval Office that he needed to resign because he had zero chance of surviving a Senate trial? Barry Goldwater, who told him that he himself, Barry Goldwater, was going to vote to oust Nixon, and that at most Nixon would have 10 to 15 votes, at most. So very different time. Can you imagine that happening today? We're drowning in partisanship.
Yeah, drowning in partisanship is a good way to put it. Larry, thank you so much, as always.
Thank you.
So we're going to take a quick break, which means it's a good time for you to download the free CBS News app on all your devices. You can watch CBSN anytime, anywhere on any connected device, and the app is free. You can also head to our website at cbsnews.com.
We'll be right back.